Some of you don't. Some of you don't know that my dad was in the military, and one of the things that he told me that you will always have a job if your leader tells you to do something, and that they don't have to come back and check on you.
Yeah. Yes.
Welcome to the Todd Leadership Podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to this content, and share it with a friend.
So we are back this week with Pastor Todd. And Pastor Todd, this week, I would like to talk about something that I think you have a knack for. And it is finding a leader in the crowd.
Finding a leader in the crowd.
That is something that I think that you do very well. Justin and I would agree with that on a personal level. And so I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about that and to help equip other leaders to be able to do the same in their organizations.
Well, I mean, obviously this is a leadership podcast, but I am a spiritual leader. And so, obviously the Holy Spirit has a big hand in all of this. I can just speak to your and Justin's story. I was just looking through the crowd, and the Holy Spirit says, I have my hand on them. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, but it's not just as easy as the Holy Spirit has their hand. They have to be willing and agreeable too.
Yeah.
It's not just the Holy Spirit. And what you'll find with people is many times leaders have a way to just lead. So, I'm a leader here at church, but when I find that, when I go on a cruise or go on a vacation and I'm put in a group of people that I don't know, or they don't know me, I tend to be a leader there and everywhere else. And what you find with leaders is leaders have a tendency to lead, no matter what they're doing, no matter where they are. And so I look around and I find the people that are leading even in situations that I haven't necessarily given them leadership roles for. You'll just find that people naturally rise to the top. Naturally, everybody looks to them, and you just find those people that do that. And so, and the difficulty in our ministry is finding the people that are just called to be leaders over just areas, and people that are called to be leaders, just staff members. And those are quite different
That's good.
leaders,
Yeah.
because some people are called to do ministry vocational. We're all called to do ministry, period. But not all of us are called to be leaders. And you've just got to learn to find, and some of it is, and maybe you can help me with your questioning. Some of it is, it's just kind of within me. I kind of feel the Holy Spirit draw me to, well, God has called them.
So I'm hearing spiritual gift.
Yes. Yeah.
And so your job is, do they know that they possess that gift, or are you drawing them out? Is that where you're taking us?
I would say yes.
And then it sounds like there's a degree of leadership.
Well, I think God talks to them about it. I think most people, if their heart is in the right way.
Yes.
When you come to them and say, hey, I feel like God's calling you to ministry, first they're like, I don't know about that. Because most everybody is humble enough. Now, if you go to them and be like, I think God's called you to ministry, like, absolutely. From the day I was born. I mean, that's a red flag, right?
That was definitely not my response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want some humility there, but ultimately what I go to people is, I don't go, hey, you were called to ministry. Many times what I'll go to them and say is, hey, I kind of feel like God might be calling you to ministry. Where does that resonate with you? And some people are like, oh, absolutely not. And some people are like, I've never thought of that. And I just say, go home, pray about it, see what the Lord would say to you. And many times what they come back is they say, well, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do. And that's a great place, because you're like, well, good. All I need you to do is be open to it. And I can teach you to do all the things that you need to do. You've just got to be open to the calling of the Lord. And, kind of like with you and Justin, Justin was more willing than you.
Oh, he was all in right away.
April accosted me for 2 hours in my living room as to all the reasons why she couldn't do it.
Well, I mean, at least I was prepared for what I was walking into. I asked asked all the right questions, and I was prepared because I
Yeah.
had answers for those questions.
Shoot, that 2 hours was a beating for me. I don't know if you could see it on me,
No,
but
you're fine. You're fine. So, your ministry will only grow to the level of pain that you can handle,
oh
Pastor
my
Todd.
gosh.
So, let me ask you this then. It sounds like you definitely can recognize that people are at different levels and there's different conversations that need to happen when you are on this search, so to speak, or maybe
Yeah.
the Lord nudges you a little bit. So, where do you prefer when the Lord shares something with you, or when you see something and you start to observe? And, once the Lord's laid that on your heart, you obviously, I'm sure you start to observe just like I would, and connect with them and ask them questions and stuff. And get to know them as a person and obviously their spiritual posture. Do you prefer that they have a clean slate as leadership? Do you find that easier, or is it easier with someone with more leadership experience, say if they're bringing it from the professional world?
Well, obviously, you have to take the leaders that God gives you. I'd say there's challenges with both ways. Okay, so really, obviously, it tends to be a little easier if they have a clean slate, so they don't have any ministry background. You don't really have to teach them all of the things. You don't have to unteach them some bad habits that they've developed. But that doesn't mean that you can't work with some people that have ministry backgrounds. So, for instance, I'll take you adjusted. You adjusted had some, but you hadn't really had any formal ministry training. And take something like Skylar and Hannah. Skylar and Hannah just took over our youth. They grew up as preachers' kids, and so they have some,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some strengths in that, and there's some weaknesses in that, and there's
So it's
some
individual.
yeah, it doesn't. So there's some things that Skylar and Hannah might know because they've just been in ministry their whole life, as to where there are also some bad habits that they might have picked up from the churches that they grew up in, or things like that, which
Yeah, we can
I
all
yeah,
all
I
do
haven't
that.
noticed. I haven't noticed any bad habits with Skylar and Hannah, so I
No,
don't
they're
I don't want
great.
to say
Yeah.
they're great people, but sometimes I've had some leaders in the past, especially if they have long ministry experience, they pick up some bad habits that sometimes you have to say, well, I know you did this at your church, but that's not really the way that we do stuff, and so it's helpful when they don't have a ton of a ministry experience, but then also sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and you have to learn to teach them the seasons of ministry, and every ministry is different.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do here at Hope Church is going to be different than any other church, but some things translate. Like, understand that there's busy seasons and there's slow seasons. Now, the busy seasons may be different at different churches than they are at the church that you're currently serving at, but you know when they have some ministry background, they understand that. When they don't have any ministry background, they don't understand that. But then they learn the seasons for the first time here, so you're not having to help them unlearn
Right.
things, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Well, I'm glad you touched on something that I think everybody probably struggles with, and I want you to circle back and touch on that. You talked about how we can bring things in being experienced, especially most leaders are typically type A,
Mm,
very driven, goal oriented producers, and just high performers. But that also means we can be very, very set in our ways and
yeah.
maybe a little bit arrogant. So what is there any system that you have in place, or is there anything that you can give us when we are dealing with someone like that we, well, not dealing with, but when we're working with someone that maybe is very skilled but needs to be a little bit more moldable to the new position of leadership they're in? Is there anything that you do to help people overcome that?
Shoot. That's tough. I mean, some of that is just the posture of their heart. I mean, if they're not willing to learn, they're not going to
So it's, are
learn.
you coachable or not? Are you
Yeah,
teachable
it's
or not?
and
Okay.
that's it. But some of it is goes back to some of the coaching things that we've talked about. I mean, you've and some of that is you've got to let them fail.
Oh yeah.
And so if they want to do things their way, sometimes you just have to let them do the things their way, let them fail. And when they come back to you, you don't go, see, I told you to do it that way. You just say, well, have you tried have you tried it this way? And you know that you've told them the right way to do it and they chose not to do it. I mean, that's not the
So
time to
your
kind of,
verbiage is very important.
yeah, that's not the time to dunk on them.
Yeah.
I mean, you as the leader and you're trying to lead them, you definitely don't want to dunk on them at that time, because then they begin to harden their heart towards you.
It
Uh,
becomes emotional.
yeah, you don't really want to do that, but you just begin to say, "Hey, have you tried it this way?" And just try to help them repair the wounds that they've, because unfortunately, ministry is wounding, especially when we fail. Many times, us ministers were our own worst critics, and so it's difficult when we fail. We don't want to fail because we don't want to feel like a failure, but it's many times in our greatest failures that we learn the most. And sometimes as a leader, you have to allow your staff, allow the people that are underneath you, have to allow them to fail so that they learn. I mean, because the old adage goes, we want somebody to be 100% ready to go before we release them, but your leadership's experts say somebody
That would
has.
indicate you don't have any more growing to do,
Right,
which
but
is not
yeah,
true.
yeah, which is not true, but leadership experts say let someone go and run with something when they're 70% as good as what you need them to be, because it's that 30% that they'll learn the most, because they've got to
And it
fail.
sticks.
Yeah, they got to fail. I mean, well, think about in your leadership. When did you learn the most? When you screwed up, when you made a mistake, when you had
That oh
someone.
no moment. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh gosh.
when you've had somebody hot to trot and
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, that's the time that you learn the most. And so you can't shield the people underneath you from those moments. But your job as a leader is to coach them through that. Or when somebody comes at you hot to trot, have their back.
Yeah.
I've had some moments where I had to let the staff fail, and it created a problem in the church, and you come beside them and you have their back and say, hey, this may not have been the best way to handle it, but they're doing their best. They did what they
Well,
thought
and
was
mistakes are
best.
necessary for that
Right.
growth.
Right. And you affirm the person, say, "Hey, I know you're hurt. I can assure you that the staff member did not want you to be hurt."
Yeah.
And they're learning, they're growing, and can you have grace for them just in the same way you'd want somebody else to have grace on you or grace on one of your children? Just have grace on them, and just know that they're learning, and they've learned from this, and they'll move on. And especially when you as a leader have their back and don't just go, yeah, they were stupid, they shouldn't have done that. And you have their back and you stand up for them, you gain a lot of credibility, and they're a lot more willing to learn from you next time,
Yeah. Yes.
because they know that when they fail, their leader will have their back. And oftentimes, even if it's not my fault, sometimes I'll take the blame for them. Like, listen, I told them to do that. Sorry. It was my fault. They were doing what I instructed them to do. And even though it might have been their idea, I take the fall for it, because, they'll give pastors some grace that they may not give
Right.
the staff
Yeah.
member. And we just move on. And then I circle back and say, hey, probably wouldn't have done it that way, but, here's where we are, and you learn next time.
Yeah. So now that we're in this place, what I would say is something that I tend to look when there is chaos, when there is an issue. I like to see how people respond when when you've got your foot on the gas all the way, or they're in a sticky situation and they need to be innovative or shift quickly, or how they're going to handle it. Is there anything that you look for, or is that even on your radar when you are looking for leaders within the church? Because a lot of the times what people might not know listening in is that we're a good sized church, but we have a very small staff, or a moderately small
Yeah.
staff, and so a lot of our hands and feet are volunteers, and so we are always looking to build leaders. So is there anything when they get to the point where, in there are situations like you just talked about, is there anything that you're looking for, or anything that other people can be looking for to maybe speak to the type of leadership that, because you said there's different types of leadership, people are at different areas. What can we find? What can we see when we're in the negative season, or not negative season, but in the hard times or the difficult situation?
I always like to see with leaders how they handle adversity, because we can all be great leaders when things are going good,
Hmm.
but how do they handle the tough times? What do they do? How do they respond? Because we're all going to face the time where things don't go well, low attendance. Maybe our event didn't go the way that we planned. How they talking to themselves, how they talking to their leaders, how they talking to the volunteers around them. I really want to see how they now when it's just me and them talking. Sure, you have full liberty to be as disappointed with me as you want to be, but are you taking it out on your leaders? Are you frustrated with the people around? Are you blaming other people? Because I want to see leaders take responsibility.
Yes.
And if something doesn't go well, it's the leader to take the responsibility and say, "Hey, my fault. I'll correct this. I'll move forward." What I don't want to see, and what's a huge red flag for me, is when leaders blame other people. And we've had that before, on our staff, where I've seen huge red flags with staff members that blamed other people, or blamed um, they would never blame themselves.
Mm.
They would always shift and remove the blame from themselves. But great leaders, and you can think it throughout history. Our greatest presidents in history, when they made a mistake, they took the blame. I shouldn't have done that. I should have moved on. I think of President Kennedy.
Hmm.
One of his greatest failures in his presidency was the Bay of Pigs, where he called a strike on Cuba. And if you go back and you look, Kennedy took the blame on himself. Actually, if you go and look through history, he had terrible intelligence, and the CIA was telling him that they could do something that they couldn't do, but he took it on himself. He was a leader. He took it square in his shoulders. He apologized to the American people, and he moved on.
Hmm.
And that's what great leaders do.
Hmm.
you know, you don't blame your team. You don't blame the people around you. You take the full weight of the mistake on yourself and you move on. And I want to see that in my leaders, and they're not making, most of the leaders here at Hope Church aren't making life and death decisions like I
Right.
am.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, but for the most part, I try not to let our lower level leaders take the full
Yeah.
brunt of that. But there is times that they make life and death decisions, and in that moment, I will affirm them. And if I don't agree with them, I will agree with them in public, and behind closed doors, I'll correct where I need to correct. But I always want to see that they are taking the full blame, even though it may not be their fault.
Mm. That's good. So, what are some things that we can do for ourselves to help condition ourselves to even look for those leaders, because we can't do everything. We have to build a team. We have to equip leaders under us in order to grow and to keep our sanity. What are some things that we should be doing in order to even be able to do that?
Well, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about church leaders, I mean, you want to find people. A lot of people are good at leading in the church when they're good at leading outside the church. Are they a manager at their job? Are they a business owner?
Mm-hmm.
Are they a leader even within the industry that they are? Do you find that when you put them in a group, people are looking to them
Mm-hmm.
to set the ways? I mean, and what I love to see is people who anticipate my moves. So, for instance, they feel a need before they're even told to do
Yeah, that's
something.
good.
Um, my dad. Some of you don't. Some of you don't know that my dad was in the military, and one of the things that he told me, that you will always have a job if your leader tells you to do something, and that they don't have to come back and check on you.
Yeah. Yes.
He goes, you will always have a job if that is what you do. And so I would tell everybody out there that if you have somebody on your team, if you ask them to do something and you assign them to do it, and you know that it's going to get done, that's a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, shoot. I mean, even people that work in the marketplace, how many times do you have to remind somebody 15, 20 times to do something? And it's
Yeah.
like, how many times do I have to ask you to
Yeah.
do that? And for me, that's where the leaders rise above, because not everybody's going to anticipate everything. Not everybody sees what you see. Now, if they do, that's an emerging leader.
Right.
But also, if you ask them to do something, you don't have to circle back. You just know once you ask them, it's going to be done.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Um, so what has been one of the most challenging things for you? Maybe you picked the wrong leader, maybe you picked the right leader and it turned out to be more work. Um, Maybe your discernment was off. Can you share a time when
Well, you always learn.
maybe not where it went wrong, but it was very challenging
You
and
all,
you grew?
yeah. Well, you always learn the most from picking the wrong people. Um,
It's a good perspective.
it's you you don't learn a whole lot when you pick the right person,
Yeah, you're right.
but you learn the most when you pick the wrong person. I could think of a few instances. There was times that I gave people. Normally, where I go wrong is give people too much too fast.
Okay.
Because you see some talent in somebody, but sometimes the raw talent when they come in and they're new to the church, they're trying to impress people. And sometimes they don't have that humility to realize they're asking too much too quickly.
Mm,
And when you come in, especially when you're adding a leader to an established group, when they ask for too much too quickly, they turn everybody else against them. Everybody else is like, "What? You're trying too hard."
mm.
For instance, one thing that I learned as a young leader, and my mentors always told me is I get put on committees and things to help with our district, but everybody looks to me as the youngest person.
Hmm.
And so if I come on too quickly, too opinionated, come on too strong, they just ping me as, he's just a young buck that's just full of
Right.
himself.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people, what I've found is in a church setting is when you're new to the group, if you come on too strong, too quickly, you turn the group you kind of turn the group around or turn the group dynamic on yourself, and they're like, who is this new person? I've also given people too high of a title too quickly.
Mm.
Because there's big a lot of people don't understand that the higher you go up in a church,
Yes.
the bigger the mantle that you carry.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think that the higher you go up in the church, the higher that they should respect you.
Mm-hmm.
you know and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't demand that people call me Pastor Todd. Now, does it annoy me at times when they do? Especially young people. Some of our youth. I grew up, and I'm sure you grew up this same way. I grew up in a Baptist church, so my pastor growing up was Brother Mike.
Yes.
To this day, if
Yes.
I see him in public, we're equals now.
Mm-hmm.
We're both pastors.
Mm-hmm. But it's a respect.
But to this day, I
Mm-hmm.
call him Brother Mike. Why? Because that's the way I was taught. But I was taught respect. And so I tell people always ask me, should I call you Pastor Todd? What should I call you? And I always respond to them in the same way. I said, listen, I am a pastor. I am your pastor. But I believe that pastor is a title that is earned with you. I said, so when you feel like I have earned the right to be your pastor, you can call me Pastor Todd. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can call me Todd. That's fine. I don't demand that people call me that. Now, is it respectful? Yes, you should refer to people as pastor. But if you go around as a leader and demand that people refer to you in a certain way, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And there's some people in church that still call me Todd, and there's some people that call me Todd and then correct themselves and call me pastor. It's whatever. But if I'm going around demanding people call me something, then it's a problem. One thing I've noticed is it's always an awkward time every year, because September is pastor appreciation, and I notice a lot of pastors struggle with, you know, if they don't honor me, does my church not honor me? And what I've always defaulted to is if the church wants to honor me, great. I don't do this job for the church to honor me.
Right.
And if they do honor me, great. I'm appreciative and I accept that honoring when it's given to me. But we can't, as leaders, where we go wrong is when we get a certain position, we expect honor when sometimes you haven't done enough to be honored.
Right. Yeah.
And I've seen with people and staff that they expect that once they get to a certain level that people should honor them. And I'm like, well, they'll honor you when you get to that point. And we shouldn't expect them to do that. And it's weird because it gets in our head.
Yeah.
And, and we,
Oh yeah. The enemy definitely will use that.
And so that's where I've seen it really go wrong is giving people too much too quickly. And then when people rise in their title, they get a title behind their name. Sometimes they expect something that maybe they haven't earned, because honestly, I was a 27-year-old when I became a senior pastor. I was 27-year-old. I had no idea what I was doing. It is by the grace of God that we are here today. Now, I hustled. I worked hard. I will tell you that I did work hard, and I probably worked harder than anybody else around me. But I was working hard, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I never expected anyone to treat me any differently because I was a pastor. Now, people do treat me differently because I am a pastor, but I never expect it.
Right.
And I'm always gracious when people call me pastor or honor me as their pastor. I'm always 100% gracious for them for doing it, but I don't do this job for the notoriety.
Right.
And I think sometimes people think some people get into this job and think that, well, I should be honored because I am pastor. You work for Jesus.
Right. Yes.
And Jesus will one day honor you for all that you've done.
Yes.
And you can't get stuck in the weeds of expecting the sheep to honor you, because then we get in a bad heart posture. And it's not good for us. Sorry, that was probably a little more than
no, because it does speak to it, because it goes so wrong when you're not ready. And to us, to the person, we are always ready.
Sure.
But that's why we need someone always pushing us to grow, because we're not ever done growing.
Right.
It's kind of goes along the same to me. Being a leader, Justin and I've had this conversation. He was elevated when he made a career change, and he was very humbled for the first 24 months.
Yeah.
And it was very hard as his wife, because I'm very mouthy. I'm very type A. I have no problem saying how I feel. And there may have been a few times where I would laugh and go, oh my gosh, do you remember that one time when, and I would tell the story and I was like, it's so weird. Here you are in the same situation and you have found that it's not that easy. Now, you can all imagine how appreciative he was that I pointed that out.
He loved that, every bit of that.
However, all joking aside, we entered into a time of prayer because he realized that while he felt that he had earned it, he matured over a quick period of time to go, you don't actually earn it. You have to be ready for it and you have to put in work. And one day the conversation comes up. He's very frustrated. And I said, dude, he's like, nobody teaches me all this stuff. I have all these questions. I said, we go through this with Pastor Todd, and everything that you're talking about here, he was able to carry. Now he still has some struggles, but now he knows I have to grow, and I didn't earn anything, or even his employees, they don't have to respect me. I have to earn that. And that's where it goes wrong, because what happens when they get in a leader position? Not only do they bleed all over everybody, but that usually ends something that maybe the Lord called them to, or a chapter of their life, because of the discouragement and the failure.
Yeah. Well, and leadership is tough, and everybody thinks they want to be the guy.
Oh yeah, everybody wants to be the boss. Everybody wants to be in charge.
Until they are the guy, and then they're like, what the heck?
Well, Zoe would always say, she was like, oh no, I do not want to be senior pastor. And one day I thought, I'm going to ask her why. And so she told me why. And I said, had no idea. Just simply because she was speaking to the level of, you said that the
Yeah,
mantle is bigger, but at the same time, we know that, Zoe has a massive calling on her life, and
absolutely.
that the Lord is always growing her. She's much younger than us, and the Lord is constantly growing. But even Zoe and I have talked about a time where she went through the same thing as Justin, that we all have to go through those things where we think we're so amazing and so ready and so equipped and so qualified, and then failure happens. And how do we respond?
Well, and every senior pastor, if you're a staff pastor, listen to this. Every senior pastor, we can't describe to you guys the mantle
Yeah.
that we carry. It's
And
not
you
a
don't understand it
yeah,
until
and it's not a
you
don't
carry
take
it.
this as I'm better than you. No, not at all. It's just the weight of, I mean, for instance, I feel the weight of every pay period. I feel the weight of we have to pay these people,
Yeah.
and not
And no,
everybody.
but you can't imagine that
Yeah,
as a leader until you walk through it, but you can prepare.
right. And not every. I mean, we'll think about it from my perspective. This is my sole income, and my wife is a stay-at-home mom. Yes, she subs from now and then. So not only is the decisions that I'm making here at the church, not only does it affect if food goes in the mouth of my children, it also affects, does everybody else get a paycheck?
Yeah.
It also affects, I have to make the best decisions. And not only do I have to make the best decisions, I have to make the best decisions for the church, even if it takes food out of the mouths of my children.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to make the right call for Jesus, even if it affects my pocketbook.
Yeah.
And it's there is no other job in the world.
And if you equipped everybody for that, nobody would be a
Yeah.
senior pastor.
Yeah.
Go, nope, I'm
Well,
good.
there's every other job in the world. You're making decisions to make you more money.
Mm-hmm.
In this job, you're making decisions so that more people will come to the Lord. And sometimes that takes food out of your kids' mouths. Sometimes that means cutting the paycheck of your best friend who no longer can work at this church because they can't,
Yeah.
because they're not in the right headspace to do it. But you have to make those phone calls, or you have to make those calls, and then you have decisions where you have two people in your office who are upset with each other, and no matter who you pick, somebody's going to be mad at you.
Well, I'm glad that we don't deal with any of that. Praise God.
Yeah, yeah, and you feel, and I've told Crystal this before. I said, babe, sometimes I feel like I just can't win.
But you can't.
But
And
you
that's
can't.
something that Justin and I talk about a lot too. As a leader, you can't win, and you have to be expectant of that. And you have to always know that it is your fault. You're the whole problem all the time. You're the problem, and you need to fix it, even if you're not and you don't.
Yeah,
It's your responsibility.
yeah.
So let me ask you this then.
We're going deep today, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
It must be Amanda's fajitas. I don't know.
Yeah.
She fed us a big
Crystal
lunch.
just texted me. We all smell like onions, by the way. I'm like, I kind of expected that.
So what if you've got a pastor in a small town?
Okay.
Okay. And it's just him in the office, and his wife is kind of his secretary doing all the things. Or even better yet, we've got a young youth pastor who's been elevated and is at a small church plant or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just track with me for a minute. They don't have a lead. They don't have a crowd to pick from. What do? What are they going to be spending their time doing? And this is a loaded question because I ask it operating under the sense of how you lead us. We are always to be looking for leaders and our replacements for the church and training them up.
It just depends on your season. I remember that season where I looked around and go, I don't have anybody.
Yeah.
But you know what? I just began to pray. I began to pray and ask the Lord. Initially when we came back to Hope Church, my mom and dad told me, well, we're not going with you. And I needed them.
Yeah.
So what do? Just get mad at mom and dad? No, I pray
Yeah.
that the Lord would prick their heart. And guess what? The Lord pricked their heart. The first thing, before I even showed up to Hope Church, I had to hire someone to lead worship. And I said, okay, well, y'all don't have anybody? No. I was like, okay, so what do? Go find somebody. And so I just started.
It's like staring at the ocean with no horizon. Like where?
So I started texting all my
pray.
buddies. I started praying. I looked into all the colleges. And we actually, our first guy, we found somebody at CF&I. I got got my pocket picked at a Subway at CF&I at this interview. CF&I is kind of a crazy place if you're ever Christ for the Nations. If you're not familiar with the Dallas area, uh, hold your wallet tight over there. Anyway, but maybe better now. I haven't been over there, and
It's
you know,
not.
he was only there. He was only there with us for 6 months, and then he moved on. He graduated and moved on, but God had somebody there. And so I would just tell you, you just got to begin to pray. And eventually, if you invest in people and you build up leaders, eventually the ball starts to roll downhill and you start to gain people. So this last, we talk about Zoe. This last, when I hired Zoe, I hired her from outside of the church. And this last go around, we had enough leaders and enough people that I was able to make 3 hires from within the church. I didn't have to go outside of the church. Now, I've been pastor now 13 years. And we've been investing in people. I've been requiring the team to build up leaders around them. And so eventually that ball starts to roll down the hill to where when you have a need, you can look within. But don't be ashamed if there's nobody there. Ask God to send you somebody. And so, now on our staff, Mo is the only one that we have that was hired
I
from
think
with.
she was here about a year before
Yeah, she was hired outside, but Mo's been with me 8 years. So it's not like it's
she
not
came a
like
year before we
yeah.
came. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like that she's a new hire. So I mean it's been 8 years. Well, it's been since we had to hire out. And Zoe was with us 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that 4 years, we've been able to build up the leadership culture around here enough that it's a next man up attitude that
Mm-hmm.
if I lose somebody, because God moves people on, moves people on for jobs, God moves people, that gives them an upgrade in church and upgrade
Mm-hmm.
in pay. That's
He's talking about you, Zoe.
yeah,
He's not bitter at all. You should see
yeah.
his face.
Zoe left me for a shiny job in in Dallas,
Hold your
working
pocket, Zoe.
working for a Dubose. It's okay. I would have left me too. Ryan's a really nice looking guy, so I would have left me too. But not that you left because he was a nice looking guy. He's a great.
Glad
That
you
was weird.
clarified
That
for
was weird.
everyone, including Ryan and
Yeah.
Lauren.
Sorry about that, Ryan. I made that really weird. Anyway, but
Zoe's face is
Yeah.
red and she hasn't even heard it
Ryan
yet.
is a great leader, and that's why she left me. Anyway, that's what I should have said. But anyway, it's people leave, and God moves them on because they're not our people. They're not our people.
Well, that takes care of the question of what do you do when
Yeah.
they leave? What, because it hurts. And
It
you're kind of
hurts.
like, why?
It hurts, I mean, initially when Zoe told me, I was hurt. My ego was hurt. My pride was hurt. But you know what? I told the Lord, I said, I know if you're moving Zoe on, you've got another plan for me. And he did. And there was a lot of heartache in that plan. There was a lot of people that I thought, oh, well, maybe this is the guy. And then they end up not being the guy. And God protects us. I see those people move on, and sometimes they do a great job. Sometimes they do a terrible job. And you're like, oh, thank you, Lord, for protecting me. Excuse me. And there goes the fajitas again. And he, but God has placed 3 people in Zoe's place to do the job, and it's the perfect people that God had intended all the time. And just about every one of these was here, felt called to ministry, and we're just hiding in the shadows because they're like, I'm not ready for this yet.
Yeah.
But when the opportunity came up, God just spoke to their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And of the 3, it didn't really take a ton of convincing. I mean, both Skylar and Gwen and, Deandra, I took them all to dinner and lunch and said, hey, what's up? And all 3 said, hey, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I didn't even have to convince them. And they'd been a part of our church this whole time.
Yeah.
And I had not known. But when there's a vacancy, when there's a need,
And the invitation really
Yeah.
makes a difference. It did for me because my confidence is superficial. That's not what's in my head. And so what it took was the invitation, multiple invitations from you and Crystal for me to I was just ignoring what the Lord said. And I think a lot of people do that
Yeah.
and we pretend it's humility, but it's probably pride if we break that completely apart.
And we don't believe that. I mean, if you look at
But the honor too, the honor
Yeah.
of that's not how I was raised, and also I'm a lady, and also no. So there's a lot that goes into that, which is why I think it is so important. And I bet you would agree, Pastor Todd, that good quality leaders or someone in a position of leadership is actively seeking and building new leaders, because you might be able to do it all for just a little bit, but not very long.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. You aren't a leader unless you're leading people.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
mean,
exactly.
if you don't have a team, then you're just a worker. And I tell them over and over again. I tell our staff over and over, I'm not hiring workers. I'm hiring leaders.
Yeah.
I'm not. This is not a
Being a
contractual thing.
worker is easy, if I'm being
Oh
honest.
yeah.
I can check boxes all day long. Where I have grown the most over the last year is, guess what I had started doing? Delegating. And I was like, I'm a terrible leader. I don't even know what I'm doing. Because then I had to challenge myself, or else I was going to fail.
Well, and the old leadership adage is this: if you want to do something quickly, do it yourself.
Yeah.
But if you want to go
And as a
far,
mom, that's my MO.
and if you want to go far, go with the team.
Right.
For instance, it would be much easier at my house to mow my own lawn.
It'd be even better if Justin would just do it.
Yeah. If Justin would come over to my house and do it. But what have I done? I've taught my son how to mow the yard. Now,
And then he's going to equip the other two.
right, he's going to equip the other two. I mean, eventually I'm going to work myself out of a job.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's supposed
That
to be.
shouldn't be feared.
That's leadership.
Yes.
That's leadership, because one day they're going to teach their sons, my grandsons, how to mow grass. Now, this is trivial. It's mowing grass, but it's
But it is still, you're passing down
well,
leadership.
It's the same way in the church,
It's a legacy.
One day my spiritual sons are going to teach my spiritual grandsons how to lead a church.
Mm-hmm.
And I live on, no matter how long I live on this earth, I live on through the legacy that I lead. And the legacy that we lead is through the people that we invest in. And so it's not just an adage. It's not just, oh, well, I'm a leader, so I want to have people to tell them what to do. No, our legacy is through the people that we invest in. As a pastor, I do funerals, and most people don't talk about, oh, well, this person did this, or they did this, or they did this. They said, this person meant so much to me because they invested in me during this time. And the funerals where people are bawling their eyes out and miss the person is because this person took time to see them and invest in them and love them in a way that they didn't have anywhere else. And so, yes, we can go do things and be a doer and do all that things, but our legacy is how we invest in people. And I invest in April, and April's going to do leadership differently than I do it, but my legacy is through the staff and how I've taught them, and I hope they don't, but they probably will. All the staff will end up leaving me and pastoring their own churches one day, and that's okay. I'm
Is
all
it though? You don't look like it's okay.
I just got all the positions filled, April. Okay, but
I wonder who I'm praying about this week.
Yeah. Well, it's no. I mean, it's just that's the fact of life. I mean, we're looking at a pastor shortage, and so I have to be okay that one day God may call you guys, as He called me, to go be the shepherd of your own church, and I hope that I can still be there for you guys when you go. I expect that every time you have a problem, you'll call me and say, why did you let me do this? I didn't let you do anything.
I mean, are you sure that's what you want us to do? To leave and still bring our problems back? We could probably do that.
Yeah.
We definitely could do that.
Just about everybody does, right, Zoe? So
poor Zoe.
Zoe's going to get tired.
We're going to have to bring her on if she can get a day off.
Yeah.
Probably not now that now that you've said how good looking Ryan is, he may let her have a day off
to your boss, Zoe, and
or Zoe, we can get a nice lunch and come see you out of that.
Yeah.
So let's land it with this. What is the one piece of advice you're going to leave us with to draw out and prayerfully seek out the leaders that are around us so that we can grow, especially to our pastors
So
that don't have a staff.
you have
They
to,
need leaders.
yeah, you have to lean heavy on the Lord. I mean, this is, the Bible tells us to pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send the workers. And so you have to pray. I know that's, like, oh, pastor, that's cliche. You tell us to pray. Yes.
But there's
I know.
pastors out there that aren't doing that. They're so
Right.
burned out. They're so tired.
Right. And then you also have to be open to who the Lord sends you. I think sometimes we expect the Lord to send us polished, seasoned leaders. And you know what? He's not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because if they were a polished, seasoned leader, they wouldn't need you.
Right.
They would already
Right.
have a job
Right.
somewhere else.
Yes.
And so, and that's what I've kind of had to work with is just, you have to work with the people that God has given you, and you've got to invest in them, and you've got to love them, and you've got to grow them, and eventually, what I've found is each new generation gets a little better than the last.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, we've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of cleaning up to do of a sort of some generations that are
Yeah.
kind of couch potatoes.
Yeah.
And definitely not putting church
Yeah.
at the beginning.
So, I'm looking forward to it. And I think, this season of leadership is a little bit more exhausting because our church has been growing kind of at a rapid clip.
Oh, yeah.
But it's exciting to me too, because I see the pieces that the Lord has put in place, and I'm just excited for what the Lord's going to do, because I kind of feel like with this group, the sky's the limit. Unfortunately, though, when the sky's the limit and we start accomplishing great things, people get pilfered from you, and that's okay. And I just know that the Lord has the next crop, and we just keep investing in leaders and over and over and over again, and
Till the Lord
Jesus comes back.
That's right. That's right. Until he returns. Okay. Well, that's all I have for today, Pastor Todd, until we meet again and talk with you next time.
All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Todd Barham Leadership Podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, press subscribe. If you're listening to us on any podcasting platform, you can rate and review us. That would really help out the show. We'll see you next time.